Hello, my weight loss winformation winning friends. Welcome to this episode of Weight Loss Winformation, where I'm going to circle back to an email that I got from a listener, and I'll remind you about that in just a minute. But the topic for this episode is alone and depressed after weight loss. This is part two. But the added part of the title is Alone and Depressed After Weight Loss, and I'm married. All right, so you remember maybe back, it was a while, actually it was episode 221. I did an episode about life after weight loss, and the woman who contacted me said that she wanted to hear more about relationships after weight loss. And I had touched on it in a previous episode that she had listened to. So you may or may not remember, but this woman, I couldn't remember if I called her Jean or Jane, so I'm calling her Jeannie Jane. She lives not in my part of the country, but has 3 kids, and they're little kids. They're 8 and 6 and 4 or somewhere around there. And she lost a lot of weight, like over 130 pounds-ish, and was struggling in her marriage. Not an uncommon story in the weight loss world, whether it's weight loss through a surgical procedure or taking a GLP-1. Significant weight loss absolutely affects relationships. And if you're a regular listener, or if you're part of the Bariatric Care online program and you're one of our neighbors in our Bariatric Care neighborhood, which we're now calling it, and I love it, it feels so warm and cozy, then you may know that this is a topic that Tabitha Johnson and I talk about every month. We do a family, friends, and relationship episode that is played on the Bariatric Care page, and she and I have also done some podcast episodes. But I wanted to jump in and talk about this topic a little more today. Jeannie Jane said that she felt like she was struggling both as an individual and in her marriage. And I want to assure you, if you're listening to this, Jeannie Jane, and anyone else who feels this way, that this is so, so common. She said, I should be happy, but I feel alone and depressed. It's a weird feeling after losing weight. So she asked for another episode about going deeper into relationships following significant weight loss. And, when she initially contacted me, as I said, this was what she asked me for. But we had some subsequent emails back and forth, and I focused at that time more on those other issues that she had addressed in our subsequent correspondences. And I felt annoyed with myself, and it's kind of stuck with me in the back of my mind because I didn't really address her initial concerns, the ones she had asked me about, the relationship issues. So I'm going to kind of bring you up to speed. I'm calling her Jeannie Jane because I couldn't remember her name. And I do hope that you're listening. And I'm so grateful that you asked this particular question because people in relationships, whether you're married or whether you have a significant other or you're just dating somebody that you were dating before you lost the weight, this is a very commonly shared experience. And in Jeannie Jane's case in particular, when she contacted me, she was also reaching a milestone birthday. She was turning 40. She was experiencing a wedding anniversary. Like I said, her oldest was 8, so she'd been married a little longer than that, lost quite a bit of weight. And what I loved about what she said to me was that she was creating a reflection year for yourself. I have a lot of people who talk about, it's my year, it's my time, I'm going to take this time. And that is a great thing. But I loved the phrase, a reflection year, because for a lot of people it's a year of woohoo, look at me now, nothing going to get in my way now, which is not a bad thing. But I loved the fact that Jeannie Jane called this a reflection year. And the reason I love it so much is because in all of my professional training and my experience personally and working with others for over 2 decades, it's a very good guideline that when a person goes through a major change, significant weight loss is a major change. Getting a new job is a major change. The loss of a close person is a major change. Going through treatment for addiction is a major change. The suggestion is don't make any other significantly large major changes for a year after you have done whatever it is, this big change. So in this case, the large change was significant weight loss. And when she wrote to me about this reflection year, I thought, what a wise woman, what a wise woman for thinking of this year as not a major change. It's all about me. It's about reflection. Where have I been? Where am I at? And where do I want to go? So that's a great way to kind of look at your life. Of course, we live in the present. We have to take our past into consideration because our past largely influences our present. It influences how we interact with other people. It influences how we have learned to communicate or not. It influences if we're a reactor or a responder. It influences whether we're comfortable with confrontation, difficult conversations. It influences whether we express and acknowledge our feelings rather than I don't do this feeling or I don't do that feeling. It's just way out of my area of comfort. So a reflection year is a wonderful thing to do as you lose weight, because as most of you have experienced, there's a lot of changes. Maybe not you as a person and your core personality, but there's a lot of changes that go along with significant weight loss. And the changes in relationships are one of the biggest areas where there is significant change. So every time I read this phrase, I should be happy, but I feel alone and depressed. I just feel sad. I feel sad about that. Very grateful that she was willing to be vulnerable and say that, and sad for everybody who experiences that. And I do absolutely understand it. And I think it's more common than most people would like to admit, because a lot of people think they should be happy when they lose this weight. They should be just radiant and glowing and glorious. Everything's wonderful, but that's not always the case. And so I think it's important that each of us acknowledge to those people who are not experiencing that, especially maybe not right away, that, yeah, this can be a big, big deal, these changes. And sometimes there's a period of time, and maybe it's an extended period of time where you just kind of feel depressed and kind of lonely, because in some ways it's a very isolated experience, at least within your own family or your own community or the people at work. Obviously not worldwide. And fortunately, there's a lot of ways for people in different communities to connect online. And I'm very grateful for that. But in your own world, maybe your family doesn't get it, or, there's a lot of change, and a lot of times people feel lonely. So we're going to talk about that. And weight issues aside for just a minute, and we will come right back to that. But I think for a lot of people in long-term relationships, I think there comes a point in time, it might be 2 years into the relationship or 5 or 10 or 20, I don't know. But I think for many people, there becomes a struggle, and there is some loneliness experienced in relationships. And that could lead, if it's a prolonged period of loneliness and you're having some negative thinking and some confusion, it can lead to depression, or maybe depression can lead to you feeling lonely, but they're interconnected. And she noted that this was a weird feeling for her after losing weight, because what I'm guessing is that things felt fine in the marriage before this and things seemed like things were pretty good. So it could be a function of the weight loss, and or, because two things can exist at the same time, it might be that period of time in a relationship where things are just tough. But I am pretty certain that the significant weight loss either exacerbated, made bigger this feeling, or it may have brought it on altogether. But I want to talk about, again, outside of the weight realm, just this business of feeling alone and depressed in marriages sometimes. Because I want to share with you just briefly, like 3 minutes, if that, of how our expectations impact how we think, how we feel, what our felt experience of something is. And I'm going to use myself as an example here, as I often do. And I want you to understand the reason that I do that is because it makes, first of all, me more of a real person. It's not like, oh, doctor, doctor. No, I am a human being who's gone through every facet of my life, which doesn't mean it's the same facets you've gone through, but all human beings experience good times, bad times, intense emotions, happy emotions, unhappy emotions. And for me, having been ill-equipped to be a well put together adult because of my experiences, I was ill-equipped, I was ill-informed, I was unprepared to be a spouse. And my expectation, which I've shared on this podcast before, that when I got married, and I was 22, I think, I may have been 23. Let's see, I got married in August. Okay, so I was 22. And in my mind, I had an expectation, which is an assumption. All me, an all me issue. My husband had nothing to do with this. I expected that his job was to make me happy. That's the job. Where did I get that? I know where I got it. Cinderella. Just saying. I loved Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, and I think that I thought when my prince came, he was going to make me happy. That's not how life works to begin with. I am responsible for how I feel, but I didn't know that then. I didn't know that my husband's job was not to make me happy. So I took it personally. Oh my gosh. You know those 4 agreements? I'm going to do a whole podcast on the 4 agreements in weight loss, but that's a book, by the way. One of the things it says in the 4 agreements is don't take things personally. Well, I took it very personally when my husband's every move did not cater to him doing, things that made me happy. Like, what do you mean you're going to lay on the couch and watch football all day? I grew up in a house with 5 sisters, or there were 5 girls and 1 boy, and he wasn't too much into sports. So I was like, you're going to what? You're going to lay on, we have 3 children. You're going to lay on a couch and watch football. He grew up with 5 brothers. That was what they did. I'm like, that does not make me happy. Your job is to make me happy. What do you mean you're going out golfing and it takes 6 hours? That does not make me happy. Oh my God. You're going to go to a football game in person, live with your brothers, and leave your very pregnant wife home alone? That did not make me happy. Lo and behold, Connie had to grow up and realize that that was not her husband's job. But I continued to take things very personally when my husband didn't do things I expected him to do. And again, we're not talking about weight loss here. We're talking about humans. And a lot of us, as I've come to understand, are not completely emotionally equipped or prepared to be super healthy young adults. We have some learning and some growing to do. And some of that can just be experience and life stage development. And some of it can be because of, you learned. Mama was a princess. This was not my case. but daddy had to bend over backwards and take care of mommy's every needs. Well, that was not my case, but we do learn a lot from our environments, or there could be a history of big T or little t trauma, which we've talked about, in which case we have unrealistic expectations of the world anyway, and we do tend to interpret things in a skewed way. We all have that lens through which we see things, and it's not always the way things really are. But here's another thing that my husband did that was super disappointing. What a horrible word, right? But it was, he did not live up to my expectations. And highlight this next sentence. Our disappointments are in direct correlation to our expectations. So my expectation, because, and this was a learned thing, I always had my birthdays celebrated. So in my family, there were good things, there were not so great things, but one really great thing that my mom and dad did was they celebrated our birthdays. We always had a birthday party with our little friends. My mom made us whatever we wanted. I always wanted a cherry pie instead of a birthday cake, and she made that sucker from scratch, didn't use that canned cherry pie mix. And so I expected on my birthday to be acknowledged by my husband. Now, do I think that's an unrealistic expectation? No, but here's the reality. My husband grew up in a family, like I said, there were 5 brothers. They didn't do that. Birthdays were just another day. So in his world, the norm was maybe say happy birthday, maybe not, and be on your way. So he did not get me a card, nor did he get me a gift. So my assumption was that he would automatically know what to do. He would do what we did in my family. That was an unrealistic expectation on my part to a certain degree. But let me tell you, friends, I made it very clear. Very clear. As in, this had better never, ever happen again. So there's that, and it didn't. But another thing that I expected from being married and my assumptions, assumptions are not a healthy thing. Assumptions are a setup for failure. Expectations are a setup for disappointment. But I thought that being married and having a few kids around would for sure seal my happiness. I absolutely wanted to be a mom. I absolutely wanted to be part of a family. And I didn't have the first clue as to how to be a really good mother or a really good spouse. That was not my role modeling. So, and I think that a lot of people, when they get married, have different assumptions, different expectations. And here's a big one, that oh my God, this intense romantic feeling. Oh my gosh, we're new lovers. We got this. Oh, we are so in love. And that's going to be the status quo for the rest of our life. Every time you walk into the door, my heart is going to go pity-pat and I'm going to have flutters. And oh my God, if that were only the case. 42 years later, let me tell you, I treasure and adore and love my husband. But I'm not going to tell you that every time he walks in the door, my heart goes pity-pat. But that new love feeling, right? The oxytocin hormones and whatever natural drugs our bodies produce and kick into high gear when we're newly in love. To me, it's the best drug of all. But you know what? I would definitely take it personally when he didn't want to be with me all the time. And he did not want to be Mr. Lovey-Dovey. And I would make assumptions. You hate my pregnant belly. You hate my haircut. You hate assumptions. Totally not fair. So let's say that after significant weight loss, your partner's attention to you may change. And it may go one of several ways, right? Where I want you to be attentive is to paying attention to what assumptions you're making in relation to those changes. So let's say that, your partner's kind of distant, maybe a little hands-off, maybe not as amorous as they once were. So in your mind, you're thinking, oh my God, he's not attracted to me anymore. He liked me heavier. Or maybe your assumption is, oh, he liked me heavier because I didn't do very many things. Or maybe your assumption is, I don't know, but let's say, oh, maybe your assumption is he hates this loose skin. He is so turned off by me. I know he just hates it. Maybe the situation is your partner can't keep your hands off you after you've lost weight. And now the assumption becomes, oh, I see. They were never attracted to me to begin with. You know, obviously, because they want to be touching me and, you know, being intimate all the time, they weren't attracted to me before. So what's happening here is we have all these assumptions. All these assumptions. There are other assumptions that you could make. You could think, well, now that I've lost weight, he's really insecure. He's just feeling really insecure about his weight, and I'm sure he's embarrassed, to be intimate with me. Or you might think, oh man, he's jealous. He's just jealous. I've lost all this weight. He hasn't, Well, friends, those are all assumptions. And what happens when we make assumptions is that we have told ourselves these things as though they were fact. So now I am responding to him. Let's say I've decided, oh, okay, your hands are all over me all the time now. And, clearly you weren't attracted to me before. Now I'm mad at you because clearly you didn't have any interest in me before. So now I am approaching him based on this false truth. It's not a truth, but I've made it a truth through my own filter that this is how it is. And so now I'm mad at you. So now I'm interacting with you from this place of anger and you don't know why. And that's what we're doing when we make assumptions. We decide something is something and we go about our lives and our interactions with that person as if we know the truth. Now, here's the reality. This was just kind of a fun fact. Did you know 66% of couples say they've gained weight together since getting together? All right. Now, at this point, from these examples that I've shared just this far, and there are many, many other issues, and we will get to those, but you're guessing, you're speculating, you're assuming. You think you can read his or her mind. You're projecting how you're thinking and feeling onto him. And my friends, this isn't going to help anything because you don't really know. If there's been no conversation about this, if there have been no questions asked, all you're going off of are your assumptions. This is a you thing. This is not a they thing. It's not your partner's problem here. This is, at this point, your problem. Now, I know that you know what the right thing to do in this situation. And this goes for all of the situations we're going to talk about, by the way, because the answer is communication. I'm not going to talk about that in depth at this point, but we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, I want to explore some of the other potential problematic issues that show up in relationships after weight loss. The one I explained was the intimacy, the physical intimacy, and there's a lot of changes in that arena. And if you don't talk about it, you're not going to get anywhere. And even if you do try to talk about it, you might not get anywhere, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. All right, so I'm going to explain some of these other problems. Then we're going to talk about how you go about working through these things. So research says, this is interesting about relationships. And this is research, not Connie. People who were single before they lost the weight, they report a 50% increase in forming romantic relationships. So the people who lose weight that were not in a relationship are 50% more likely to become engaged in a relationship. On the other hand, people who were married before their surgery showed almost a doubling in their relative divorce rate. That is an interesting statistic. What is behind this high percentage of divorce after weight loss surgery? First of all, and I want to really, really highlight this. Remember I talked about that year of reflection that Jeannie Jane so wisely pointed out? People are too quick to get divorced quickly after weight loss. That is not the time to make major change, unless perhaps there's physical abuse or some other kind of abuse going on. The reality is, there's so much change that happens. And for myself, it's the same in the treatment of addiction and in recovery. There's so much divorce. And what I think happens, and I don't care what it is, I think in general, we know there's 50% divorce rate. It's higher than that after bariatric surgery, after people go through treatment. What I think is, if people took time and learned to communicate and worked through the confusion and the issues that are now surfacing, fewer would end up in divorce. Not all, for sure, but I do believe that fewer would end up in divorce. I'm working with a young woman right now, and she is on top of it. This woman, she's had a lot of therapy over the years. She grew up in a very dysfunctional home, but she's in her mid to late 30s, I'm guessing. But she's done a tremendous amount of therapy. So she came into this process with a lot of good skills, a lot of good knowledge, a lot of good information about relationships and changes and all of those things. Well, she too, now at a year or so after surgery, is contemplating divorce. So I suggested to her, I said, that may be the path you follow. You may absolutely end up divorcing your husband. But what I would like to ask you and him, because he was willing to go to therapy with her, not with me, with another therapist, what I would like you two to do is go to therapy together. Because even if after you work through these things that have surfaced for you after surgery, you will part with fewer questions, with fewer animosity, with less blaming, and from a much better perspective to co-parent your children. And that made a lot of sense to her. And I believe that, if people get divorced, that sometimes that needs to happen. But what I would wish is that people would go through therapy, even if they say we are getting divorced. That's a given. But let's process through some of the things that we're angry about, that we're bitter about, that we're resentful about with each other. So both people get an opportunity to talk about what's gone on with them through this process. Because then both people leave the relationship in a healthier position. They are much less likely to carry those issues into another relationship because, friends, we carry all of our own baggage into every relationship we have. So people who leave one marriage and they're blaming the other party for all of the problems, they're taking their own set of issues into the new relationship. It's never one person's complete fault that a marriage dissolves. Now, one person may have a much bigger part of it, but each of us has something. And we will replay that out in the next relationship, and the next relationship, and the next relationship, until we get to the core of what our part is and learn healthier skills for that. That's a little side note here. So let's take this woman that I'm working with and Jeannie Jane and all of the other people who are contemplating divorce. And that happens for a lot of reasons. And that's okay if that's where it goes. But give yourself time, not only time, but time in therapy. And I don't mean 3 weeks, I mean 6+ months to process through the issues so that you both, if you choose to leave a healthier person for the next relationship. Okay, so this statistic, we just read that. And then there was a study at North Carolina State University. And they found that even with a weight loss of 30 pounds, not that significant if we're talking about morbid obesity, which if you qualify for bariatric surgery, we are talking about morbid obesity. And nobody likes to hear that, but it is a reality. So even people who lose 30 pounds, I talked to a woman this morning, I had an EGD. Yes, I did. And the good news is my ulcers are healing / have healed, which is great news. And let me tell you where my ulcers came from, friends. I took NSAIDs for years and years and years. That's neither here nor there, but if you do take NSAIDs and if you've had surgery, you're going to back off those anyway, so that's good for your tummy. All right, just a saying. But the nurse we were talking, she asked me what I did for a living, and I said I was a psychologist, and I didn't say anything about being in the weight loss world, but she told me that she had lost 30 pounds on an NSAID. She said I was always the same weight, and she said when I went through menopause, I put on 30 pounds no matter what I did, and the other nurse in the room said, I just started them too. Anyway, at a weight loss of only 30 pounds or more, couples began fighting. And what did they fight over? They started fighting over food. They started nagging each other about exercise. They felt annoyed with one another when there was time spent on these weight loss efforts by the person who was in the weight loss process. Those are only some of the issues. But let's talk about a little more in detail how these problems arise with weight loss and why they're so common. So there's a lot of social changes. For example, if somebody loses weight, especially if they're in a program where there's a support group or they become active in a support group online, they are more socially involved for a couple of reasons. Maybe their mobility is better. Maybe they feel better about themselves and they want to go out and do things they haven't been able to do in the past. But the significant other is like, what's going on here? You know, we used to stay home and watch TV all the time. Now you want to do all these things. I don't want to do all these things. Where are you going? Who are you spending your time with? So that aspect can sometimes change. And this can lead to your partner. And again, remember, we're speculating here. Also remember, the degree to which your partner is psychologically minded, as in tune to their emotions, they know what they're feeling, they understand why they're feeling these things, is going to have an impact. So your partner may be feeling all these things, but they could be conscious of it. Maybe it's subconscious to them because you don't live in the world of emotions and feelings and talking about those things. So the partner may be feeling left out. The partner may be feeling resentful because you're gone all the time. The partner may be jealous. The partner may also be feeling lonely and depressed. Here's the thing. We do not get to make up our minds. We are not mind readers, so we can't say, oh, you're just feeling left out. You have to find out. You have to inquire. You don't get to dictate how another person feels. You can say, I'm observing this, and it seems like you're resentful. You know, based on the things you're saying to me, I'm wondering if you're feeling left out. Take note of those last 2 sentences in the way I phrased those. Because if I say to somebody, you're just jealous, that is going to be a huge turnoff. They're going to be immediately defensive. And now we're going to have a thing that pushes us further apart from each other. But if I'm suspecting that my partner is feeling left out, but I don't be like, you're just feeling left out. You can join me if you want. Nobody's stopping you. Again, not nice on my part, not compassionate toward what they're going through, and highly sets them up for a defensive position. But if I say, you know what? I have been more active, and it just dawned on me, you might be feeling left out. Are you? So now I'm inquiring. I'm curious. I'm compassionate. I'm like looking at things from their perspective. What a novel idea. Something all partners should be doing. So rather than accusing somebody of the assumption that you've made in your mind, ask, inquire, be kind, because when you're going through changes, they're going through changes along with you. And so be compassionate about what they're going through. Another thing that changes is, and we've talked about this in my first example, but there are a lot of metabolic and hormonal changes. And so a person may have, now I'm not just talking about sex here, but they may have more energy. They may have more endurance. They may want to go hiking. They may want to go join a softball team or a bowling league or something that they used to enjoy. And the other partner, who's also, 66% of those couples who've also gained weight, maybe they're like, oh, I don't have the energy. I'm too tired. I don't want to do that. And the person who's lost weight probably think, well, you can join me or you don't have to, but I want to do this and I'm going to live my life. And that's okay. There's got to be some communication and there's got to be some compromise. But those metabolic changes can lead to more endurance and more energy. And then those hormone changes too can increase sex drive. And buddy, as you know, this can cause a lot of issues and a lot of confusion because on both parts. Because now maybe you're much more interested and the partner's like, who are you? Or maybe, you're much more interested, but you're interested in, the guy at the office you had a crush on, even though you got a spouse at home. It can lead to a lot of problems. Now, your partner may be like, bring it on. I love this increased enthusiasm about our intimate life. But, maybe the partner doesn't love it. Maybe they're like, maybe they're like, listen, this is my interest level. This is my capacity level. And, you seem to be wanting to engage in this activity a whole lot more than I am. This is a problem. That can lead to feeling rejected. That can lead to feeling lonely. That can lead to feeling depressed. That can lead to, the people out there have interest in me. And maybe all of a sudden you're enjoying that interest from other people that maybe you haven't had for a long time. And this can become a real problem. And let me tell you, I've witnessed this for 20 some years as I've gone to these conferences. And I've observed people who are going to live what they think they missed out on in high school. And now they are doing things that, unless you have an agreement in your marriage to have an open marriage, they're doing things that people in a committed relationship aren't in agreement with. So that also can lead to a lot of problems, right? This area of weight loss can be so confusing and it can lead to a lot of problems. Now, maybe all of a sudden you're getting a lot of attention outside of the home and you hate it. Maybe for you, weight was a protective mechanism. Maybe it made you feel like, okay, people aren't going to approach me sexually and I like that. And all of a sudden they are, and that's terrifying. So that can lead to all kinds of emotional things going on with you that you may or may not be sharing with your partner, and they may be confused by all of it. So there's a lot of communication issues. There's a lot of assumptions being made. There's a lot of expectations that are spoken or most likely not spoken. So this leads to all kinds of things. Now, some people after weight loss have a much improved body image, right? And then they want to dress in a way that makes them feel proud of the changes in their body. Maybe the partner's uncomfortable with that. And so maybe there's arguing about that. So I'm happy for people to have improved body image. If it's causing problems, then there needs to be communication, and there may need to be some compromise. There may need to be, some therapy involved, because it can be beneficial, of course, improved body image, improved confidence that often comes with weight loss. Those are really, really good things, but it can really cause a lot of disruption in a relationship because we don't know what's happening with the other person. They may be all about it. They may be like, hey, I love seeing this confidence. This is the you I always knew, but you hid it from the rest of the world. And I love how you're letting your light shine. Or they may be like, I don't like this. I don't like all this attention you're getting from other people. I don't like this you being gone all the time. I don't like feeling like I'm not important in your life anymore. But they may not have the awareness of those things. And so rather than sharing it, they're acting it out. They're accusing. You're gone all the time. You don't even want to be with me anymore. You just want to go flaunt yourself. You're acting like you're a teenager and you're 50 years old. I've heard all of those things for many, many, many years. So there's all kinds of dynamics that occur in a relationship, and those can be positive depending on the relationship. Those can cause damage to relationships. So I want to say again that maybe you're feeling lonely and depressed in your marriage for a variety or a combination of some of these things. Your partner may also be feeling similarly. The person that's losing the weight may be out there really ready to explore the world. And I am all about that. I am all about that. But if you're in a family system, remember that you are part of a family. And when I went through treatment, they reminded us a lot that addiction is a family disease. It requires family recovery. The same is true with the disease of obesity. Obesity affects other people in your life in different ways. And you may not be aware of. Maybe you're so consumed with how it's affected your life, you're not aware of how it's affected other people's life. Similarly, you might not be aware of how these changes are affecting them. You may have the expectation or the assumption that everybody's going to be happy for you and thrilled, and we're all going to go along for this great party. That may or may not be the case with one or more of the people in your life. So make it a priority to do this reflection. What's going on with me? What's going on with them? All right, here's another thing that I hear too often. People who are losing weight sometimes say, well, I married that person because I didn't think I could find anybody else who would marry me. Now that's heartbreaking in so many different ways. But again, I implore you, go to therapy, find out if you do love that person in ways you didn't know you did. Find out if you like them less than you think you already do. But take the time to investigate. Take the time to get to know what this experience of change has been like for them. Let them get to know what this experience has been like for you. And in that process, you will also benefit from that self-reflection. People are reactive, and we lose weight and we're woohoo and let's go party and see you later, ditch the family, and out they go. And then sometimes later they're like, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Who was I? Why did I let that person go? They were the best thing that ever happened in my life. So when I say implore, I mean implore. Please slow your roll. Slow your roll. Take time before you make drastic changes, because if you have children, it's not just the marriage you're affecting, but it's the children you're affecting. And although children can survive divorce, and sometimes it needs to happen, If you look at the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Events study survey, that is one of the questions on there. Did your parents get divorced? That has tremendous impacts on children. Now, I have seen some amazing co-parenting, and that is the best of a bad situation for a child. But the best is for the parents to get their crap together and stay together. It's not always going to happen, and I wouldn't always encourage that. But I would always encourage the couple to go through therapy, work through their anger, work through their resentment, work through their sadness, and leave the marriage better people who are less resentful toward the other person. That leaves you much more open to healthy co-parenting and sparing your children the damage of hearing you talk badly about them or you talking badly about them. And even if you're not saying the words, they feel it. So do yourself and everybody else involved a favor. Take the time, process the loss, process the emotions, and move on from there. Okay, so don't forget the issue of transfer addiction. This is something real following significant weight loss. A lot of people are emotional eaters. Some people have a food addiction. Therefore, people find other ways to deal with their emotions if they don't literally learn to deal with them in a healthy way, like explore them, feel them, find healthy ways to work through them. If it's still, I don't want to feel this, and food was my go-to, alcohol works pretty quickly to get rid of an emotion. Oh, if I spend 5 hours on Facebook doom scrolling, I'm engaged and I'm not thinking about how I'm feeling, but I'm also not tending to my job or my family or the things that I'm responsible for. Maybe you start spending wads of money. It could be shopping online, it could be gambling, it could be you get real irresponsible financially because it makes you feel good. You get that quick dopamine hit. You're doing what you always did with your feelings and trying to squash them down in some way. It's not good. So be cautious of that because that'll affect your family. You can be darn sure. That'll affect your kids. That'll affect your relationship. So again, don't be hasty in making decisions that are going to last a lifetime. So obviously, to me, the solution is communication. Unfortunately, for all of us, most of us aren't very good at it. Most of us want to stay away from conflict. Most of us want to avoid difficult conversations at all cost. Most of us want to shove things under the rug. Most of us use unhealthy skills like blaming, shaming, calling names, slamming doors, silent treatment, whatever it happens to be, because we don't have the skills. Many of us are so ill-equipped to do the thing that I call the easiest, hardest thing we do, which is talking. It's easy to open our mouth and spew words, but communicating, that's a different story. It's very, very difficult. And I believe, I have no research to back this, but my personal belief is that the lack of healthy communication skills is behind most divorce, most failing of friendships, a lot of corporations failing, because we don't know how to talk and express our emotions, partly because we don't even want to feel our emotions. So we need to learn healthy communication skills. We need to learn to look at our side of the issue, our problem, our contribution to the problem, instead of blaming other people. But we're so protective, and that can come from trauma. That can come from being called names because of your weight. It can come from all these things. But we are very inept, ill-equipped. That doesn't mean we're stupid or bad. It means we haven't learned the skills. So please go back and listen to every episode on communication. Take a class in assertive communication. I was talking to a woman recently, and we were talking about emotions, and she said, well, I don't really do anger. I'm like, no, you don't do anger, but it doesn't mean you don't feel anger, and it doesn't mean you don't express anger. You don't allow yourself to recognize anger, which I'm going to do a whole podcast on that because I think that's the case for a lot of people. I don't do anger. So I'm going to do that. But most of us are ill-equipped. And the lack of communication leads to assumptions. They're just jealous. It leads to us thinking we're mind readers. Oh, they just don't want me to be happy. They just wish they could be in my life. They just, and we fill in the blanks for other people. We do not have the right to do that, my friends. We do not have the right to do that. It's arrogant. It's inaccurate. It's dismissive. It's discounting. And I know those aren't words you would like to apply to yourself. So when you find yourself saying things like they're just blank, stop yourself short and say that's an assumption on my part. If I really want to know, I will ask. And I will ask in a proper and a pleasant and a non-judgmental, non-accusational way through questions. You know, I've been noticing you've been distant lately, and I'm wondering if you know, you're feeling uncomfortable around me. So I'm not saying I'm wondering if you're jealous. I'm just wondering if you're feeling uncomfortable around me. So we ask questions. If things are askew in a relationship, we need to ask what's going on. That's not an easy thing to do. We need to be pretty intact emotionally ourselves. And if we're not, we need to do our own work on that. And if the other person is not real in tune with how they feel and how they think and what they're going through, you might get a half-baked response because they might not know how they feel. They may not be any better at communication or understanding themselves emotionally than you are. And it's kind of like you become at an impasse, leading to premature divorces a lot of times or breakups. So that leaves both parties feeling lonely, both parties feeling depressed. And when I tell you, the greatest tools my husband and I learned in our many years of therapy and our returns to therapy throughout our 42 years of marriage is learning how we feel, what that feels like in our body, how to express that feeling using feeling words and not accusations like, you make me mad. When you walk out of the room and I'm talking to you, I feel mad. Big difference. So when we learn how we're feeling and how to express those emotions in a way that invites conversation rather than slams the door on it, then we can work through these things. But if you don't know how and they don't know how, you're pretty much screwed. So again, people need to be taught these things. They need to learn these things. And again, it doesn't make you bad or stupid. It means you weren't taught. And most of us are not taught. A, to identify our feelings. B, to speak about our feelings. C, to ask other people about their feelings in a non-critical, non-judgmental, non-threatening way. And we have to be able to do this. We just have to be able to do this if we want to come together with the people we care about, as opposed to distance the wedge that automatically comes with significant change. So, you know, and it's not like people don't talk about this before they have bariatric surgery or take a GLP-1. Most people talk about it with their partners. And how would you feel? And would you support me? And yeah. But the reality is, talking about it without being in the midst of it is so different because you don't know what's going to happen to you emotionally and biologically and hormonally and energy-wise and all of those things. So you can't always anticipate this. I always say weight loss surgery is like a wedding. You know, a wedding is a very different thing than a marriage. A surgery or taking a medication is a very different thing than experiencing and working through the changes following the weight loss. So, you know, we know the statistics related to marriage, but most of us don't go into marriage thinking, yep, that'll be us. No, we think that won't be us. We'll survive. We know most majors fail, but not us. But you get into the woods and you get into the weeds and you don't know how to navigate around that. And so people just leave without learning how. So wherever you're at in your journey, whether you're planning to lose weight or you've lost the weight, learn to communicate your feelings, learn to listen, learn to appreciate what the other person is going through, ask them to try to understand what you're going through. We can't always completely, but when that happens, what I've learned to say is, I realize you can't understand. I'm going to ask you to respect this. So learn healthy communication skills. And you're not going to do that on your own, my friends. You're just not. So go to therapy, get a coach, take a class, read the books, listen to the podcasts, because you need to expect. You need to expect whether you're heading into this journey or you're way deep into it. Relationships are going to change. They're just going to change after surgery. That change might be better. That change might be disruptive. But if you talk about what's going on with each of you and you learn to compromise and listen and to say what would make this better for you, what would make this better for you, chances are you can get through it together. So set relationship goals as you go through this journey. Even if you're in a part of it where it's like, okay, we are so in the weeds, start saying, let's take some time together. Yes, I'm going to continue to be part of my support group and I'm going to talk to my friends more often and whatever, but let's set some time just for us. And you might set some family health goals. You might talk about the intimacy issues so that those issues are out in the open and what's it like for both of you. And then talk to your family members and your friends. Like, you know what, guys, it's really important that I set aside time for my husband and my kids. I love hanging out with you guys. We're doing a lot of fun things, but it's come to my attention that I've kind of ignored them, or they're feeling lonely and depressed as I become this social person. Or I'd like for us as a group to do things that are family oriented. When I first got into recovery, our kids were young, and a lot of our friends that were new into recovery were young also. So we would have, and in the treatment center that I went to, I mean, they had, sober Thanksgiving. They had Christmas parties. They had, every month we had a picnic, and the families were included because that is so, so, so important. So it's not to say you shouldn't lose weight, absolutely, for your health, whatever. But couples need to prepare themselves for changes, and they need to stay up on things as the journey progresses. Because, you may have started out thinking it's going to go like this, but there may be some curves and twists and turns in the road. So make sure you talk about these things. And according to weight loss experts in this research, the best thing a couple can do is establish how each person can help the other. What happens a lot of times is we start working against each other because we're mad and because we engage in passive aggressive communication. So work together and keep talking about the goals, keep talking about the feelings, keep talking about the critical reasons, the whys that you did this and the whys you want to keep doing this. Talk about ways the other person might be sabotaging you. Help them learn, not to help give them some confidence or some it helps the panic. It's like, listen, things aren't going well, but I'm not going to walk out the door tomorrow. Let's get some help and see what we can do. So it takes away some of that panic they might be feeling, like, oh my God, they're half out the door. Doesn't mean you're going to stay together, so don't give false hope, but say, listen, let's go in together and figure out what we can figure out about this. And it helps calm that, and it might lessen the the sabotaging of others. But try to stay realistic. Talk about what's going on. Talk about how your body image changes. Talk about how you feel about each other's bodies. Talk about your different fitness levels. Talk about all of the things so that you can not necessarily always be on the same page with what you're doing. My husband still likes to watch football. I have zero interest in it. So it doesn't mean you have to be on the same page about everything. But what we did with that, because he came from that family of 5 boys, I came from that family of 5 girls, he watches the teams that are truly important to him, not every game that's on television. That works for me. And so we learn to compromise so that it's a win-win. So you want to work together to improve your communication, the understanding, the compassion. And again, if things work out great, they work out great. If they don't, at least if you've gone to therapy and you've done the work, you'll leave on better terms, and that won't be much better for everybody involved. So it's not uncommon to feel depressed and lonely in a relationship after significant weight loss or other significant changes. So do yourselves a favor to learn the communication skills, because if we can communicate effectively and appropriately, it's amazing what can happen, even if the result is a splitting up of a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, leaving a job, whatever. So do yourselves a favor, dig deep, do the work. None of this is easy. This may not have been anything you thought you would have to deal with after weight loss surgery, and you don't have to deal with it. But there are consequences for not. So you choose, what do you want long term? What are your goals? And your meaningful matters. What has great meaning to you? What matters the most to you? For me and my husband, it was our family. It was doing things differently. It was letting go of the substances. It was learning to parent right. It was learning to communicate. And we put our all into it. So what are you willing to do? Depends on what you want and how badly you want it. All right, my friends, as always, we are talking about your health, which is your responsibility, not just your physical health, your relationship, your financial health, your spiritual health, all of your healths. So your responsibility this day and every day. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Please share this podcast with your bariatric coordinators, with your surgeons, with your support group leaders, with your neighbors, with your friends, on your social media. I think this is great information for everybody, and my hands are tied as to how many people listen to it. I'm doing my part, and I'm going to ask you to please help me out with this. It's a love project for me. What do they call that? A passion project. Yes, this is a passion project. I just want people healthier. And a lot of the topics I talk about are not just about weight and weight issues. They're about life and life issues. So please share. And thank you again for spending your time with me. It is very much appreciated. And please check out Bari Aftercare, BARI, aftercare.com. Have a free month. Become part of our neighborhood. It's a safe one.